me, the inspiration is really a belief in the power of young people to create social change. So how do you get to that place where anytime that you confront a problem, whether it's a big, complicated societal issue, whether we're talking about climate change or racism or gun violence, or whether it's something in our personal lives or professional lives, how is the default mindset, oh, I can do something about this, as opposed to just being completely overwhelmed or paralyzed by it? And the fact that so many of these young people come out of this experience, that it's not just helping them in their own personal and career development, but that they are sharing that gift with others to make a broader impact on the world and sort of leading with those values, like that's really profound. That's really transformational. And so that's the other part that keeps me motivated and excited and energized about this work.
Hello and welcome to CSA's Collab Space. My name is Amy Cisse. I am here with Scott Rechler. I've known Scott for many years now, so I am very excited for him to be on this podcast today. Scott, thank you for joining me, and can you please provide an introduction?
Of course. And Amy, thank you so much for having me on your podcast, and really excited to be a part of this. And I know you've been part of the LearnServe community for quite some time now, so really grateful to have this moment to share with you. My name is Scott Rechler. I am DC born and raised, and I am co-director of the organization LearnServe International. And we are a leadership and social entrepreneurship training program for young people who want to change the world. And I can tell you a little bit more about how that works if you'd like to hear that.
Please dive in.
Amazing. So we bring together mostly high school students from really diverse backgrounds. And the thing that they have in common is that they're young people who are like, I want to do something good in the world. I don't quite know what, I don't quite know how. And we bring those students together and we ask them, what pisses you off? What are those issues that make you mad, that make you say, this isn't right, the world can't be this way? And then we flip it back on them and say, okay, well, what do you want to do about it? And over the course of 7 months, we meet with them regularly and guide them through that process of taking those ideas and bringing them to life. So getting them to think about those issues inside and out from different perspectives, doing some of that customer research, human-centered design work, coming up with creative solutions to those problems, putting together a project plan, testing a pilot project, and ultimately pitching those ideas to reviewers who are going to give them feedback, and LearnServe gives them seed funding to get those ideas up and running and off the ground.
And just being a part of LearnServe as a mentor, as a reviewer, I have always been just absolutely impressed by some of the ventures that the students are working on. So you are doing an amazing job with the students for sure.
Thank you. Yes, they are impressive. They're impressive.
Very much so. Absolutely. So what inspired you to join LearnServe?
It's such a good question. And I think a lot about, for me, the inspiration is really a belief in the power of young people to create social change. And I say that recognizing that that is not necessarily the default expectation that most adults have of young people. One of my mentors, Eric Dawson, who's founder of the organization Peace First, had a really interesting framing around this. He said that most often when adults think about young people, they think about young people as perpetrators of problems, victims of problems, or apathetic bystanders to the problems that surround them. And rarely do we think about young people in that fourth space as those who are actively engaged with and working to address those issues in their community. And for me, that has really stuck with me and guided a lot of this work, that this tremendous value, power, energy, insight, creativity that high school students today have. And most of the way that we're set up, both inside of school and outside of school, is not putting them in those positions to both lean into those leadership skills, help them find their voice, or let alone do anything with that voice. And that's really what LearnServe is all about, of giving those young people that exposure, that opportunity to figure out what is that impact that they want to make on their communities right here and now and down the road.
And that's one thing I love about LearnServe, is that it really, in my mind, helps shape the youth into thinking like, I can do something right now.
Oh, yeah.
And once you go through a program like that where you're guided into thinking beyond what your current experiences are and thinking about, like, I know that I can make a difference. I mean, it's just going to change the trajectory of their life for sure.
Yeah. No, a lot of what I think about is this concept of like muscle memory. And
Mm,
what I've thought about is like, how does change making become part of your muscle memory? So how do you get to that place where anytime that you confront a problem, whether it's a big, complicated societal issue, whether we're talking about climate change or racism or gun violence, or whether it's something in our personal lives or professional lives, um, how is the default mindset, oh, I can do something about this, as opposed to just being completely overwhelmed or paralyzed by it? And I think that's one of the biggest gifts that we're able to share with the students, of really giving them that opportunity to figure out, oh, I can actually create change, lead change. I have that agency. I have that power in my hands to do something about it.
right. Absolutely. And do you feel like there's specific goals that you all are trying to accomplish with the program?
Absolutely. And I think so, in terms of goals of LearnServe, the way that we like to think about it is really empowering young people to take action.
Mm,
That's a lot of fancy words, but I actually like the way that one of our alumni phrased it. So one of our alumni, Noah Dyson, who's currently a student at Elon University and was in LearnServe a few years back. He's been really looking at the issue of access to mental health and mental health care for young people, especially within the Black community, and looking at some of the racial disparities in terms of access to mental health care. And at some point, he shared that LearnServe helped him take his anger and translate it into passion, and then take that passion and translate it into action. And for me, that is the essence of what we're about, of how do each of us take that, whether it's that anger, whether it's trauma, whether that's anxiety, whatever we're carrying with us, how do we translate that into passion and turn that passion into action to make a real difference, a real impact on those issues that we care about most?
and how do you even have conversations with students to get them comfortable with talking about difficult and challenging topics that could impact them, could impact their community? How does that work?
That's such a good question. So, in terms of getting students in the right space, part of it is the selection process. Is that we're looking for young people who are thinking about and wrestling with these issues already.
Mm,
That being said, my experience of working with young people is that all of them are thinking about these issues. There are very few students who are just like, oh, I'm not aware, I don't care what's going on. And I think they're thinking about these issues much more than many of the adults in their lives give them credit for. Um, to take it a step deeper, one of the things that I've realized, especially coming out of COVID, is I think there's a lot that's weighing on high school students' minds right now. There's a lot of trauma, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety that goes well beyond the normal things that are challenging about being a high school student, right? There's always the challenges of academic pressures and trying to get into college, and do I fit in with my friend group, and what's my relationship like with my parents and other family members? Like, there's all of that that's there. But I think for this generation of young people as well, both some of their lived experiences. We've got a number of students here in DC, for example, who they or their loved ones have been affected by gun violence. This is part
mm,
of their everyday reality. There are fights that are breaking out at their schools on a regular basis. These are young people who are living through some of the extreme parts of climate change, and so had to miss school for several days last summer because of, I guess in June, right before the school year got out, because we had the wildfire smoke that was coming from Canada. And so it's not an abstract concept. And then on top of that, through social media and other channels of communication, they have access to every single injustice that's happening any part of the world. If there's a police officer who shoots an unarmed individual, they hear about that. If there's a natural disaster that's caused by climate change in some other part of the country or the world, they hear about that. And so the analogy that I've often used is that it's sort of like a balloon, that these students are inflating and inflating and inflating this sort of trauma and stress and anxiety without those release valves in place to actually sort of diminish that pressure. Um, and I think for many of them, they don't necessarily have structured places in their lives to have those conversations. It may or may not be happening at home. It may or may not be happening at school. It may or may not be happening in their peer groups. And I think what those students find is that when we open up that conversation, we ask, what pisses you off? They're like, okay, well, since you asked, let me tell you about that. And we've got students who are writing on one side of the paper, going to the other side of the paper, and then engaging in dialogue with each other and realizing, like, oh, on the surface, it looks like we may be really different, but actually the stuff that we're wrestling with and thinking about, like, it's pretty similar and pretty aligned. And I think by holding that space for them, by setting that as a safe space, a confidential space for them to talk through these things that are on their mind, that's really powerful, and it's something that most of them don't have in other parts of their lives.
That is such a great perspective that I hadn't even thought about before. Like, I didn't think about the fact that they have so much more exposure to what's going on in the world, what's going on in the country. And I didn't even think about the level of anxiety that might produce for them going to school and having to worry about gun violence in the schools on a regular basis. It seems we're regular enough where it's happening more and more, or just even the threats of, someone bringing an armed or bringing a weapon to school, and that can turn into a big deal.
Yeah, and even if it's not in their school, like talking with students about gunfights that broke out on their commute to school, fears about going home after dark, and fears of what's happening in their neighborhoods. It's not an abstract concept that they know individuals who've been affected by it. They themselves may have been affected by it, and so they're carrying a lot with them, and it's really challenging.
Absolutely. So through the program, like, what will be the most growth you've seen from a high school student where they started out versus how they exited the program?
That's such a good question, because I feel like every student is on their own journey, that all of them come in with some amazing strengths and skills already. And then all of them, what they get out of the program looks a little bit different for each one of them. But I think across the board, them sharpening their sense of self and place in the world around them, their understanding of the world around them, and building some of those technical skills. That's sort of the sweet spot. If you can picture that like a Venn diagram, right? That like, oh, I really understand what are those issues that are going on in my community. I really understand where I sit or stand vis-a-vis those issues and what role I can play. And oh, I've got some of the technical business and professional skills to pull that off. That being said, there's a couple of examples that come to mind, and I think one of the ones that's front of mind right now is a young woman named Jordan Warren, who is actually one of our honorees at LearnServe's Gala coming up on May 2nd here in Washington, D.C. And she, I think, is the only student who has gone through all of our programs twice and then gone on to be an intern and staff with LearnServe. And so I've seen her pre-COVID, during COVID, coming out of the pandemic. And amazing, amazing growth, that this is an individual who, when she joined LearnServe, really passionate about the issue of religious persecution, especially outside of the United States. And she and a friend were working on that issue, that big, global, and really compelling. But in terms of her own personal presence, was a little bit quiet, trying to find her footing. And when COVID hit and everything went virtual, had a really hard time of it, especially in school, with the support systems that she was getting, or in many cases not getting. And so after going through our first year program and second year program, and LearnServe stuck with her through those 2 years, she said, I don't think that I got out of this experience what I really wanted to or needed to. Let me give it another go. And so she
Hmm.
actually rejoined our first year fellows program, created a new venture focused on neurodiversity in the Black community, which is something that she both has directly experienced and been affected by in terms of a later diagnosis, but also has realized the underdiagnosis of ADHD and autism and other things within the Black community. And so she's become a powerful advocate and champion for that. Continued that work through our second year LearnServe Incubator program. So she took a deeper dive, put together a more sophisticated venture pitch and project plan around that. Went on to become an intern with us last year, and so was working directly with some of the incoming first-year LearnServe students to coach them through the venture process. And this year, we actually hired her as a facilitator on staff. And what's been amazing is to see the way that she has found her voice and presence, both in the classroom as a facilitator, in those one-on-one conversations. And if you talk to any of the fellows, she's one of those people who made them feel most at ease and comfortable in the space. And just her own presence and leadership from when I met her 4 or 5 years back to today has been phenomenal. And so part of the reason that I do this work is I think if the world could have more young people like Jordan out there, and if we can be a part of helping to shape them on that trajectory, that is a win for those young people, but even more so, that's a win for the world.
Absolutely. So it's great to have that kind of introspection where you say to yourself, I feel like I could benefit more if I try this again versus saying,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't get what I needed out of the program. Next, moving on.
Yeah.
Um, that's definitely awesome to hear. And that she continued on and continued to work with LearnServe.
Yeah.
And you touched on something about the incubator program and
Yeah.
fellows. What are the differences between the two? Or is there another name for it? Did I get that correct?
No, you've got that correct. So
Okay.
the sequence of LearnServe programs for young people who want to be a part of our work, they can actually participate with us over 2-3 years with a sequence of programs. So typically, most of the students will come in our LearnServe Fellows program. And this is a 7-month long program where students meet weekly, plus additional professional development opportunities in between those weekly sessions, where we guide them through the process of designing and launching a social venture. We don't expect that they have a project in mind or off the ground when they come in. And I would say we're one of the few organizations that's working with young people who may never have thought of themselves as a social entrepreneur or change maker. They've just got that raw passion and interest in doing something good in the world and don't quite know what to do with it. And we become their sort of professional home to test out some of those ideas. And for students in those programs, the first part is really just thinking about what is that issue, that cause that I care so much about that I want to devote some time and energy to focus on. And by the end of the year, we hope that students have a pretty good project plan in place and ideally have gotten some piece of impact off the ground, even if it's super small scale. Um, those students who choose to stick with us into a second year can join our LearnServe Incubator program. And this is actually a virtual program where they take a deeper dive into those projects and do much more sophisticated customer research to really understand the communities that they're hoping to serve and partner with in this work, to be a little bit more strategic in their pilot projects and what they're trying to test and learn, and come up with a more sophisticated pitch using a slide deck to present their ideas. One of the really cool things about this program and about LearnServe as a whole is we are not just a Washington, D.C. or US-based organization, but actually we have program partners in Zambia and Paraguay who are facilitating this exact same experience for their students in Lusaka and in Asuncion. And so we've got young people in the US, Africa, and Latin America who are all going through this process of discovering their own power and voice and creating their own social ventures. In the incubator program, students from multiple countries come together. And so this year, we had students from both the US and from Zambia who are participating together as part of the LearnServe Incubator program. And so on top of that whole venture development, they actually were learning about each other's culture and the issues in each other's communities and saying, oh, that's what mental health issues look like in Zambia. Well, this is what we're seeing in the United States. How can we compare notes on that? And as a capstone to that experience for students who go through the incubator program, they actually have the opportunity for the US students to travel overseas to Zambia. And so we'll have 8 students this year traveling with 2 facilitators from LearnServe to Lusaka. They will meet up with their peers in country, and then together the 2 groups will travel and will work with community-based organizations in other parts of Zambia as part of a deepening of their own leadership and entrepreneurial experience and exposure.
Nice. That was a great summary to put it all together. What's
Yeah.
so funny is that we've been working together for years, and I kind of, I knew about the different
Yeah.
programs. It's interesting to hear about like the evolution of how they go between the various programs.
Yeah.
And so when
And this has evolved a little bit too, that the international part used to play a different role in the organization in the early years. And we actually, LearnServe started 20 years ago with international travel experiences and service experiences for US high school students. And that actually used to be one of the entry points into LearnServe leading up till COVID. And we rearranged the sequence of programs because we found that the students who had had prior experience working with LearnServe before traveling had a much richer experience, were able to make deeper connections and understanding of the impact of their work in the community. So it's very much an evolution on our end as well, and really grounded a lot in our experience over 20 years, and also some of the reflections on what equity and inclusion looks like, not just in the US context, but what that means vis-a-vis our overseas partners as well in the communities that we're working with there.
Nice, that's pretty impressive. 20 years.
20 years, yeah.
That's awesome. And so, with the mentors that you all would bring, it seems like they're all professional people working in different spaces in different companies. What are
Yeah.
some of the interesting companies you've worked with?
Well, we have been very honored to work with you and have you mentor some of our students over the years. And I think that's a great example of really introducing students to all the different ways that you can make an impact in your community. And it's not necessarily one career path. It doesn't mean that everyone has to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone has to be in technology. Not everyone has to work for a nonprofit organization, but that there are many ways of living one's values and showing up professionally. And so we love working with folks from all different demographics and backgrounds. One of our longtime partners, and potentially the one that introduced us, is a company called Social Driver. Their founder, co-founder, Anthony Shop, and I went to business school together at GW many years ago. And I love one of their taglines, which is "The future is bright." And it has resonated a lot with me, since that's what I think of when I meet our LearnServe students. And so he's been really instrumental, as well as his team, in introducing us to professionals from all different backgrounds who are able to guide students through these professional, sort of their own professional growth and journeys. Another strong partner is Link Strategic Partners here, a consulting firm based here in Washington, D.C., but working across the country and around the world. And they've been helping students hone their pitches before their capstone pitch presentations. And so just seeing the ways that folks who are sort of maybe a couple steps ahead of our students are able to take a step back from their own work and figure out what are the conversations, the relationships, the mentorship, the coaching that I would have wanted earlier on in my career, and how can I provide that for these emerging change makers who are phenomenal leaders, but also are still very much learning, getting their feet wet in terms of what this actually looks like in practice. And so the gift for those young people to be able to be in the presence of seasoned professionals who've had a couple more years experience figuring all this out is really powerful for them.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that when I've sat and talked to different high school students, like you really don't know, what they may need help with. But then when you just have conversations with them, I found a lot of times like I'll have resources that I could share. And so when we just did the panel review session, and I was talking to someone who's working on building up just more awareness around getting into technology as it relates to some of like the courses that he wants to provide or trainings that he wants to provide. I was like, here are some resources that you can use, because I use Microsoft resources all day long. So I shared those with him.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a part of it too, is they might not know of what resources are even free or available to them. And I think that as professionals, if there's any even like words of wisdom or encouragement that you can provide, or like, especially if someone's a little shy, you can just talk to them and just say, you got it, like keep going. And this is great. And you definitely see them kind of like spark up a bit if they're kind of unsure if they're headed in the right direction.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying, um, it goes even deeper than the sort of, let me introduce you to someone. But I think there's the layer deeper is really, for most young people, most of their relationship with adults is adults who are telling them what to do, that it's their teachers saying, here's the assignment and it's due on this date, and this is what you're going to be graded on, and here are the consequences if you don't turn it in. It's their parents saying you have to be home by this time. Like, but as young people, like most of our world is prescribed by a set of rules that the adults create for us. And I say that with the full consciousness as both a facilitator of programming for young people and the parent of two kids. That's a lot of like young people's experience. I think we flip that dynamic around. And for many of
Mhm.
the students, this is one of the first times that they've been in a place where the adults are saying, so what is it that you care about? What is this issue that you've been researching that you're now the expert on? What do you plan to do about it? And what kind of help do you need from me? And I think there's a subtle but really profound transformation that happens even in that pitch moment. Like when you showed up as a reviewer, seeing the nerves of the students beforehand of like these scary reviewers coming in, and then coming out at the other end of being like, oh, that wasn't so bad. And actually, like, Amy introduced me to these two other organizations and gave me these resources and like took me really seriously and was so excited about my idea. And that as like a confidence booster for them, thinking about how do I show up in the world as a human and certainly as a professional and as a change maker activist, like that's a profound transformation that happens. And I think part of it is restructuring the dynamic between adult and young person from what they've normally been experiencing in their own schools, communities, or homes.
Absolutely. That is such a mental shift. Like,
Yeah,
wait, I have to think of something that's important to me. And then it puts them in the driver's seat.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And yeah, like that's a like, wait, I'm used to people telling me or shaping the way that I go. And so I think that that's one of the things that I've noticed is them kind of like mentally, not all, but sometimes you'll see them kind of get stuck a little bit on thinking through what their venture is going to be or just shaping it out because it's a paradigm shift for them, which is awesome because I think that especially in high school, like that is the time for them to start to kind of take control and charge of their lives in a lot of ways because you don't want them to get to college and now they're starting to think for themselves because it's going to be a whole culture shock.
That's what I tell them all the time. I'm like, trust me that you're going to look back on this a few years later when you're in college in that class or you're in part of the student organization, your first internship, your first job, and they're going to ask you to put together a project plan or a budget or do some sort of critical analysis or research around something. And you're going to look back on that and say like, oh, that's what those folks in LearnServe were teaching me. And I'm like, I don't need you to be an expert on a budget or a logic model or public speaking or any of that right now, but I need you to have that in your consciousness and in your toolkit, because when you're called to do it, like high school and college is not set up to teach most of those professional skills. And so like, I want them to be ready in that moment when, someone calls on them and says like, okay, put together this project plan and a budget. They're like, oh, cool. I know how to do that. I did that in LearnServe.
Right.
And interesting, you were talking about the sort of lasting role of the mentors and I think the adults and even the peers in these students' lives. And one of the interesting pieces related to that, we just completed our second external impact assessment. This is our 20-year impact assessment. So we did surveys and focus groups with students going back to participants in the program from 2003 and onwards. And one of the pieces that stood out to me most is that upwards of 80% of students said that LearnServe had shaped their career trajectory in some capacity. So either it had helped them clarify what it was that they wanted to do or feel better prepared for the thing it was that they chose to do. That 85% of them consider the social impact of their career when making career decisions. And a similar percentage are also thinking about the skills that they learned in LearnServe at least once, if not multiple times per year. And this is not just students who participated in the program 2 years ago, but this is students who participated like 10, 15 years ago, are still drawing on some of the skills and experiences that they learned with us. And I think that's one of the things that stood out to me most from that survey, because like we work with students in this sort of snapshot in their life that's in high school, that transitional period as they're getting ready to go on and do things sort of that are, sort of far outside of the home. And the fact that their time with LearnServe has been such a pivotal and transformational moment for them, such that they lean back on it as they navigate their career trajectory. Like that's pretty deep. So
That's pretty
in
impressive.
case you wonder what the long-term impact is of the mentorship that you do, those reviewer moments and everything, like all of those pieces add up and they really, they stick with students for quite some time.
That's really awesome. And it's awesome that you all are measuring like the impact because it shows that you're really making a difference for sure.
Yeah. The other piece that I thought about a lot from that impact. So the other stat that stood out to me, 98% of students remain civically engaged after their LearnServe experience.
Mm.
And that's a broad definition of civic engagement that includes sort of keeping up to speed on news, voting and elections and things like that. That part's not quite as surprising, but the part that stood out to me is that 2/3 of those students are serving in a leadership capacity in their volunteer engagement. So they are not consumers of volunteer experiences curated by others, but they are the ones who are starting organizations, starting clubs, joining boards, leading organizations or initiatives. And for me, when I think about the bigger mission and sort of the bigger picture of what the world needs in this moment, yes, this is a powerful experience for young people, but also given the polarization that we're seeing in our country, the lack of communication and conflict resolution skills locally, globally, in all respects, the more young people that we have out there who are leading with empathy, leading with resilience, leading with creativity, leading with passion, leading with courage, like that's what the world needs in this moment. And the fact that so many of these young people come out of this experience, that it's not just helping them in their own personal and career development, but that they are sharing that gift with others to make a broader impact on the world and sort of leading with those values, like that's really profound. That's really transformational. And so that's the other part that keeps me motivated and excited and energized about this work.
That's awesome. That's truly amazing because it definitely helps. It's like stepping out of yourself and
Exactly.
being more aware of, how can I make a difference in others' lives for sure.
Exactly.
Community involvement. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what do you feel like is the vision for the next phase of LearnServe?
The vision for the next phase of LearnServe. It's really motivated by what we've seen in terms of the impact over the past 20 years, both how profoundly transformational this is for the young people who are part of it, and also how these young people are leading in the ways that the world needs from them. And so our hope is that we will have LearnServe students, not just here in Washington, D.C., not just in Lusaka, Zambia, not just in Asunción, Paraguay, but on the horizon, hopefully coming next fall, as cohorts of LearnServe students in Baltimore and Maryland, cohorts of LearnServe students in Costa Rica, and really having a model where we can partner with community-based organizations around the country and around the world, so that they can guide young people from diverse backgrounds in their community with a passion to create change through this process of finding their voice and designing and launching social venture projects. And then really creating those opportunities for those young people from really different parts of the world to then put their heads together, learn from each other, support each other in their respective ventures, and facilitate that next level sort of deep dive into their social impact, as well as that deep dive into cross-cultural understanding. And really, I think, striking a balance that I've seen in few other organizations of having the experience of LearnServe be truly local in communities across the country and around the world, and also that each participant not only feels like they're of their own community, but fully connected to and integrated with this phenomenal and growing network of young change makers globally who they can lean on and be inspired by and collaborate with to bring social change to life in the ways that the world needs really badly right now.
Awesome. So if there were adults, companies, people who wanted to serve as volunteers, mentors, support LearnServe, how do they get involved?
Wonderful. So if you are someone who believes in the power of young people to create change, then we are excited to work with you. And we have a number of different ways that that can work. For folks who are interested in joining as mentors, we are actively recruiting right now venture mentors to work with our LearnServe students next school year once we get programs up and running. We have a couple of different options, some that are in our second year program, pairing a mentor with a particular student and really accompanying that student through that next phase of their venture design and growth. For a first year program, it's less of an intensive commitment, and it's an opportunity for mentors to meet many of the young people in the program roughly once a month throughout the year. And for the young people to get exposure to quite a number of professional trajectories, backgrounds, different ways of thinking about social change. For folks who are interested in more one-off opportunities, we're always looking for reviewers to give students feedback on their pitches, both in person as well as virtually as well. We've got reviewer options. And then really, this has been a grassroots base of support that has made this organization possible. The fact that we're able to do all of this is really standing on the shoulders of the LearnServe students and families who have come before the ones today who have invested in this organization, the network of partners and community members who share this belief in the power of young people to create change. And so what we're looking to do in the communities that we're working with is really to build up that ecosystem of support, both in person, giving that mentorship to students, but also philanthropic support to make sure that we've got the resources to be able to guide students through this experience with a level of thoughtfulness and intentionality, showing up for them in the ways that they need, both through the curricular content, but yeah, we started doing wellness checks with students on a regular basis through a student success advocate, and really trying to look at these young people as whole people, and realizing that it takes a whole community to make that possible for these young people. So we invite folks to join as philanthropic supporters and part of this broader ecosystem that we're building. And they are
Awesome.
welcome to reach out to me personally. They can go to learn-serve.org, which is our website, which is getting a refresh soon. So hopefully there will be a brand new design in a couple of months that really conveys the energy and passion and impact of this work.
Okay. And you all are on LinkedIn as well?
We are on LinkedIn. We are on Instagram. We are on Facebook. We are all the places where you want to find us. We should be there.
All right. And I'll drop links below the video. And what about students? If they wanted to participate in LearnServe, how does that work?
Yes, if students want to participate in LearnServe, we would love to work with you. We are right now kicking off the recruitment for next year's cohorts of LearnServe Fellows. For those of you young people or adults who are connected to young people here in the Washington, D.C. area, we are having programming that will be meeting in downtown D.C., kicking off, I believe, in early October. And so we're accepting applications now via our website, and you can also reach out to me or anyone on the LearnServe team about that. And really looking for young people who've got that passion to create change and really want to make an impact in their community. For folks who are outside of the DC area, we are hopefully able to offer a virtual cohort next year as well. And so if you are interested, please definitely let us know, and we will see if we can make it possible for you to be part of that virtual cohort, since we want to be as inclusive as possible. And if you're in Baltimore or any of the other sites, hopefully soon we will get the programs up and running in those areas too.
And I would say that everyone at LearnServe is very friendly to work with. So feel free to reach out, email them, reach out to them. Everyone I've encountered has been amazing at LearnServe. Any other updates you want to share?
Yes. If any of you are listening or watching this and are available on Thursday, May 2nd, LearnServe is having its annual gala here in Washington, D.C. We would be thrilled to have you there. We will be honoring the incredible civic champion, Aaron A.J. Jenkins, who's the former executive director of Operation Understanding DC, which is one of our close peer organizations. And he currently works in the Office of the Attorney General here in Washington, D.C. We'll also be honoring Jordan Warren, the young woman that I described a little bit earlier in this conversation. And so that will be on Thursday, May 2nd at Hook Hall in Washington, D.C. And tickets are available online. We would love to see you there.
Excellent. Scott, it has been a real pleasure having you today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Amy. This has been wonderful to spend this time with you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.